We're live.
Francis, you're muted. Francis, you're muted.
Oh, can't hear him.
It's always good to have a little technical difficulty to break the ice.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was talking okay before. Sorry about that, folks. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's council meeting, 30th of June, 2022. The whole of council is here. We have regrets from Mayor Dave Devine. So today I'll be trying to navigate us through our agenda. So I'll need your help as council since it's the first time. I'll appreciate your help as we go along. So I'd like us to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We gather with the intent followed by the peace and living friendship, by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. And from a personal point of view, somebody who's a recent immigrant to this country, I appreciate the fact that we can do that. Call the meeting to order. And looking for a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Councillor Finney?
Please, I'd move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Seconded by Councillor Penny Carver. On the question, all in favor? Agenda is approved. The next item on the agenda is minutes. We have meetings for the meeting on June 14th, 2022. What's your wish, Council? Councillor Wilson?
Move that they be accepted as presented.
Seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Next up is the minutes of the meeting of the June special meeting of council, June 17th, 2022.
Deputy Mayor, I'd move that we approve the minutes of the June 17th special meeting as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. On the question, all in favor? Thank you.
So I'll move that the minutes of the special meeting on June 24th, 2022 be accepted as circulated.
Thank you, Councillor Carver. Look for a seconder. Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Minutes have been approved. Thank you. We have no presentations, Council, this time. I forgot to mention for folks viewing this from home, we will have 10 minutes at the end of our regular council meeting to take questions on the items of the agenda tonight. So if you can note them down and hold them, we'll give you an opportunity to do that. Next item is correspondent action items. We have a letter from Talking Trees from Ballard, Harder. CAO, Deputy CAO.
Right, thank you. One quick question, if I could, Deputy Mayor, just if people do have questions, there is a slight lag. So they can, if they have a question about anything that's addressed in the council meeting, they can add it to the box, the comments section, and we can catch it then. It's just to make sure we don't have any kind of internet hiccup or something like that and the question doesn't get missed. So thank you for allowing me to put that in.
Thank you, appreciate that. And are you the one taking on the correspondence item 4.1?
I don't think she meant to do that.
Okay.
So as far as the correspondence, just to provide some commentary, I did want to note that a lot of the requested information is available on the town's website. Staff have been working over the last number of weeks here to enhance the amount of information on the solar project that can be found on the website. So we can, I think in terms of disclosure of reports, it would probably be appropriate to direct Val to the section of the town's website on the project where those reports can be found, or at least any reports that have been disclosed, which at this point does include the wetland delineation study and Strum's load analysis in terms of the siting of the or location of the service corridor.
Oh, I could barely hear you there, Deputy Mayor. Does the Strum report address the specific question about the possibility of routing the transmission lines along Main Street?
It addresses why the town was not recommended to do that, and it was essentially, in addition to the cost, obviously, the limitations of existing infrastructure would cap the size of the project quite significantly, and thereby reduce the benefit to the public, to the utility, in terms of the amount of energy generated for the cost. So that is referenced in the study. One thing that has, I think is important to point out, it isn't just a straight cost decision. They did assess the cost of upgrading the lines, but also cited a significant limitation on the capacity. So that is addressed in the Strum report, although it is a fairly technical report, the way that those folks write.
Any other follow-up question, Councillor Carver?
Yes, I'm just looking at the questions that were asked, asking about the any supporting documentation about the rationale for routing the power lines at that site rather than further back on the properties in the wetlands.
Yeah, so that's where the Hemera report is, the wetland delineation, and it identifies the different options that were studied and provides the rationale in terms of wetland impacts and why council selected the route.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the reality is that the reports will not capture the nuance of council discussions to get to the decisions that were made. So that's something that I guess folks should understand. Based on the reports, council made decisions, and those nuances will not necessarily be in the reports.
I have another, if I may.
Yeah, Councillor Carver.
If another question, thank you. So does the information available on the website address the question about the no net loss of tree canopy or trees? And there are some very specific questions.
It doesn't address that part, because really that's a question concerning the town's GHG reduction action plan. It's more saying, the solar is an example of one of many developments in town that have resulted in trees being cut. How do we intend to achieve a zero net loss of trees over time if we're losing trees right now? And, I think that's a perfectly good question, but we do have a committee intended for that purpose. Maybe that question could be referred to the Climate and Environment Committee for discussion. But ultimately that plan doesn't have all the answers. It's not intended to, but we're working towards, a long-term plan. I think it's well known to Talking Trees that the town is committed to developing an urban forest master plan, and that will be part of the, delineating what actions would need to actually be taken to achieve net zero tree loss over time. So, I think those are actions that we know are yet to be fully fleshed out, and the committee is a good place for that discussion. That's what it's intended for.
Well, I would like to make a motion that the Talking Trees address to Val Herder, that a response be made by the town or the council direct staff to prepare a response to Ms. Herder. It's providing answers or responses to the specifics of all the questions that she asked, including the reference that the CAO has just mentioned about the tree canopy issues could be addressed to the Climate and Environment Committee or Advisory Committee, and the prospect of the town developing, I can't remember if we're looking at a tree policy or tree bylaw, whichever the correct wording would be.
Do you have a seconder?
It might be, if I could interject, Deputy Mayor, it might be around the wording of the motion, which was, I understand, Councillor Carver, developing on the fly. But normally, we do get, as you said, correspondence does have council passing motions directing us to respond. And I can certainly be directed to cite the website section that answers those questions. But if the correspondence was going to be written instructing that the Climate and Environment Committee could talk about the net tree loss issue, would your motion be to refer it to the committee and send correspondence advising of such, or would it be a separate?
That could be a separate motion.
Mhm.
As you say, developing motions on the fly.
So, Deputy CEO, do you have a motion that we can sort of
Well, if
read and maybe
if-
clarify?
If the subject is separate, I mean, I would venture to suggest, and Penny, I'm sorry, I really don't mean to step on your wording, but that staff be directed to write a response to Ms. Herder, identifying the information that can be found on the town's website in response to the questions raised, and noting that the Climate and Environment Committee was recently established by the town for the purpose of reviewing the GHG action plan, including goal with respect to net tree loss.
Is that acceptable, Councillor Carver?
Yes, and they also refer to the pending work or discussion of the tree bylaw.
Well, that part I didn't include because I wasn't sure if that was part of what was causing difficulty getting a seconder to your motion. Maybe not.
So, just to clarify, what's the motion on the table so that we can find if there's a seconder, is the willing seconder? Councillor Carver, you want to try again?
I'm willing to go with the CA, with Mr. Hyde's suggested motion.
Okay.
Still
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Finney?
I'm happy to second that, Councillor Carver.
Okay. Seconded on the question? Councillor Wilson?
Just voting.
Voting? Voting? Okay, on the question, all in favor?
Excellent. Thank you
Motion has been passed, yeah. Motion is
Thank you
carried.
for that, Penny. That was I was curious to see how we're going to get through that one. Excellent.
I guess for me, the point that is slightly unclear is, are we actually forwarding this letter to the committee for action? Because the motion did not, to me, did not come across as if we're doing that.
Yeah, I think it was clarified that would require, that was not Councillor Carver's intention. That would require another motion. If somebody chose to make it, it would be in order. Otherwise, that would not, we wouldn't actually be referring it to the committee.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in council's interest to do that?
I mean, the advice I would provide is that it is already on the committee's agenda in the sense that the committee's purpose is to review the plan, and that's one of the actions cited in the plan. I believe, Councillor Carver, that that's one action that would be being discussed at the next meeting based on how far we got in terms of reviewing the plan last time.
So
Councillor Carver?
I would like to, thank you. I would like to make a motion to send the letter to the Climate and Environment Advisory Committee for information.
Mm-hmm.
We have a second?
Send it along with the town's response.
Yes,
'cause
thank you.
there was no- yeah.
Seconder as amended?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, on the question? All in favor? Motion's carried.
Thank you for
Moving
that.
on.
Could I just take a minute to say, it's a weird feeling to make a motion and then just be hanging out there. You can second, people can second the motion and you don't have to vote for it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we got to a good place on that one. Anyway,
I
thank
think
you.
I think one of the challenges is, at least for me, if the motion is not clear, I find it very difficult. I mean, just as the way we humans operate, we find it very difficult to sort of say, I'm backing you up on this one and we can move on, but point taken.
I get it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I do think, Deputy Mayor, that the letter kind of is indicative of kind of the onus is on the town for us to have a crisp story around why the Main Street corridor wasn't chosen. And I think, Dylan, you spoke well to the two salient points. One was that we could never achieve the scale required to make the Solar Garden economically viable through the Main Street corridor. And the second was, even if we could, the cost would be so high that it would thwart the economic return of the Solar Garden. But I just think that question is still outstanding in the community. People still have, they're just not as informed, obviously, as the 7 or 8 of us are. So this will probably keep coming up until we've had a chance to really, make that point well understood in the community. Anyway, I know Martha's got it in her to-do list, so I'm sure it'll continue to improve as people know more.
Agreed. Next on the agenda is correspondent for information items. What's your wish, Council?
Move that we receive and file, Deputy Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, Councillor Carver.
I would like to suggest or confirm that Paula Lassard would receive a reply or just a thank you letter. And every time this kind of issue comes up, I wonder whether we could just assume that any letter coming from the public would receive a reply of some sort, whether it's thank you for your message that's been forwarded to council, whatever.
CEO.
There's never been a better time for me to say that we need to amend the policy to do that, because it's on the Policy and Strategy Committee's agenda for our very next meeting. So
Okay, we'll do it then.
I think we should consider that. It's something that's come up a lot. But for now, if you want to make a motion that council direct staff to provide a response thanking her for the letter, that would be great.
I so move.
So moved by Councillor Carver, seconded by Councillor Finney.
Sure.
On the question, all in favor? So moved.
We still have the motion for receiving and filing.
Yeah. So moved by Councillor Now to receive and file.
Yeah, I think it's already on the books, but
Is it?
it's just a matter of voting for it. I think it was already moved, I think, and seconded.
Yeah, you're clear on that, Town. Okay. All in favor to receive and file? Sorry about that. Motion's carried. Moving on to staff reports. Next is 6.1, staff report to council. Any questions for the CAO?
I'll just quickly comment off the top. I hope council is interested, as I am, in the statistics section that gradually develops more and more. I think we're starting to have quite a robust collection of statistics. It's always interesting looking at them side by side, because it's a strange complement of services provided by the town.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Carver?
So one of the questions I had was about the nature of the parking problem on Upper Main Street. And exactly what is the problem and where specifically?
Maureen, this was in your section. Could you speak to this one?
There's an issue with people parking at Betty's up there. Many patrons park in no parking zones. It's a new business, and our bylaw enforcement officer is working on that. So some signage has been improved up there, I believe, CAO. And our bylaw enforcement officer keeps at it. It is it's somewhat difficult because, of course, where it's a business, that's it's the patrons of the business that are parking where they shouldn't be. You can get a ticket on a Tuesday, but that doesn't mean that that's the same car that's parked where they're not supposed to be on the Wednesday. So it's something we're working on.
Yeah, and I think having been there, the staff of that facility do try a lot to make sure that they warn people not to park there. So,
Oh, good.
Yeah, I've been there and sort of seen them coming in. So if you've parked in this particular spot, you need to move it and things like that. So they're also trying on their side to make sure that that doesn't happen. Well, just curious about this in terms of signage, since those parking spots are in private residence. Can town put signage there to sort of discourage parking? Or is it expected that the folks who live there will put signage?
No, we do always put signage up indicating where people can't park. The thing about Mahone Bay is that you can park except where signage or markings prohibit it. But yeah, we do always put up signage where you can't, typically in coordination with property owners who have expressed that they have a concern.
And there is signage at that spot. I haven't looked carefully to see that. Okay.
Yeah, I knew there were originally just markings to indicate where you could park, but obviously people also park on the shoulder onto what is essentially just grass or gravel, and so signage was needed to supplement that.
Great. Councillor Carver?
Thank you. I had one other question from the staff report, and it was about the sustainability spotlight recognition program. And I was curious, maybe I've missed something, and I was wondering what the criteria are, and is there a nomination process? And is this something that the Climate and Environment Committee is involved in? Or is there any cross-referencing to that? And I think
Maureen, I am aware of the initiative, but you might be better positioned as the person composing the newsletter. Would you be able to speak to this?
But just having worked with that department, that is one of the outreach initiatives that is being undertaken by our intern that's working with us from Clean Nova Scotia this summer. That's actually kind of an old idea. That was something that we were doing before the pandemic hit, a way of highlighting the good work that's being done by businesses in our community. So right now, the big effort with this is to get some interest going, and we'd love to hear from businesses, and our intern is reaching out to businesses and has reached out and said, we'd love to hear about your initiatives. So we were very happy to feature Encompassing Designs, and we're really hoping to get some more people that are happy to tell their story about what they're doing, and it's really about small changes that they're making. So again, before the pandemic, we had featured several businesses that had a wide variety of things that they were doing. So it's really picking up that idea, and we're hoping that it's an opportunity to highlight what is happening in Mahone Bay already.
great, thank you.
Welcome.
I guess I have a question regarding the process, the plan review process that we've been going through for a while now. In terms of timelines, do we have specific timelines that we can sort of say by this time we will have at least the documents back with the steering committee, and then by this time we want to see that there's public engagement going on, or are we still in that uncertain phase?
Well, I'd say the uncertainty really has just been around, the conditions to have a meeting and engage in public engagement activities, because they were initially held off due to a desire to be able to have in-person engagement activities. And obviously we had anticipated that would be coming in the fall, last fall initially. We took the fall working on revisions of the draft documents, so we never quite got out to the point of going for engagement, and then Omicron hit. even though COVID has sort of waxed and waned in the meantime, most recently we're back to meeting remotely. So, you know, I think I had commented in April, you know, any time now we'll get to scheduling our steering team meeting, and I think that is still the intention. It's just been a difficult time to schedule it. So typically engagement activities, you know, the fall and spring are a good time to do them, and it would be great to intend to get out to engagement activities this fall. So at this point, you know, I'm a little concerned at the prospect of fitting that steering committee meeting in July, although that is a possibility. Otherwise, I guess depending on council's willingness, we would probably have it in September because we don't typically meet in August. And if the steering team's prepared to, we'll get right into those public engagement activities in the fall. But that will depend on the steering team's willingness to do so. One thing that was committed is that the document can be sent out several weeks ahead. It's a very large document. So what I would hope to do would be to get the document out in July, at least give the steering team all of the month of August. It's a nice, you know, 100 pages to read over and sit outside on the beach or whatever. So that's as far as I can say the approximate timeline, unless councillors tonight have any desire to suggest amending that. It's just been a tough thing to balance. To, you know, how are we really going to feel comfortable that this document has reached the wider community?
Yeah, that's very helpful for me, because I was in my mind, one of the reasons I was asking is that knowing that we'll be breaking in August, and if the steering committee hasn't seen the document, hasn't met, then the fall might be in jeopardy in sort of being able to fit something in there. But if we can get the document now, and hopefully very quickly, first couple of weeks or first week of September, I don't know, be able to meet as a steering committee, then maybe things can move along.
It gives them, we've got time now to get polling for dates and whatnot. So yeah,
Yes.
you can expect the steering team can expect to hear from us shortly about that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Carver?
Thank you. I'm a little concerned about the time frame there. If we receive the next draft, I'm assuming there will be an opportunity for the steering committee to review it and suggest more edits before it goes out to the public. So is there really enough time to do that if we don't work on it in July?
Well, I guess, you know, my take on that is that we're in the exact same situation we were in with the prior set of revisions. We could get through them in 2 meetings in early and late September, and we'd have lots of time to do. I think the intent should be to do some consultations before Christmas and probably some into the early part of winter before providing council with the draft. But I think if we need to, we will take longer, and if we take longer, we'll just have to adapt to that.
Okay.
I mean, you know, it's up to the steering team. I wouldn't want to prejudice the.
Okay, so we just take as long as we need. Yeah.
And the community will, I'm sure, be looking forward to engagement activities whenever we get to them.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the CAO? The staff report? Normally we receive and file. We receive for information. Councillor Feeney?
Please.
Yeah. Councillor Now seconds. All in favor? Motion's carried. The next item is the staff report on the flag policy. CAO, you want to speak to this, or is it?
Yeah, I can speak to it. Maureen may want to add some additional commentary, especially where the policy is concerned. But there were a number of different reasons incorporated into council's motion to staff to update the policy. And as in any case where we're updating a policy, there may be other details that we notice in that process. One of the main things that was looked for from council and that is covered in the report was with respect to the flying of a flag appropriate to the Acadia First Nation. And there is some commentary there where the primary recommendation, I guess, that staff would suggest to council tonight concerns reaching out to the Acadia Band Council with respect to the appropriateness of the flag and as it's reflected in the policy, and also as it would be potentially reflected in practice in terms of the other side of this, which is the practical recommendation around obtaining at least one additional flagpole. So those are the sort of core recommendations contained in the report. I don't know. I'm sure there are some questions. Maybe throw it open to anyone who either wants to action any of that or has questions.
Sorry, Councillor Carver.
Thank you. I thought the policy was great, and I think it's excellent to be consulting with the Acadia First Nation about which flag is appropriate. And I did have one suggested revision for the policy, which was to, and I can't remember where it is in the policy now, but in the federal policy, they specifically say that if the time frame of a funeral, if a funeral isn't taking place, it's either a certain number of days you fly at half-mast, but if a memorial service is held 2 months from that time, from the time of death, or 3 months, that you just do it for the 24 hours at the beginning, and then again 24 hours of the day of the memorial service. So I didn't explain that very well, but the federal policy had captured it in a very efficient way. So I'm just suggesting that we somehow find that wording and put it in ours as well. Sorry for going all over the place on that.
It's okay, we got there in the end.
Hmm.
Any Councillor Finney?
I think this is a real improvement, especially when I think we've seen even in the last year where either the federal government or the provincial government hasn't necessarily followed the federal flag policy standards. But there, so there is always a decree from on high. I think we certainly saw that a year ago when I think essentially via royal assent, changes to the national flag policy was made to lower the flag to half-mast all across Canada. So we're a year later, but I do think this is an improvement. We have there are a number of recommendations that I'm happy to move along, Deputy Mayor, if you'd be prepared to hear some motions.
Just before you do, I have a quick question. Deputy CEO and I had a conversation a while back around the number of flagpoles, and we talked about the possibility of flying the national flag and probably the provincial on one pole. And I think in the report it says it's not recommended, and they're not cheap flagpoles. And I'm sort of wondering, I've seen lots around in this in the South Shore and beyond that happens. So why wouldn't we be able to do that and save a bit of money?
Maybe it's a question that could be put if the motion passes to speak to the Acadia Band Council. Maybe that's a question that could be put to them because this report predominantly concerns obtaining a flagpole on which to fly the Mi'kmaq Grand Council flag or another flag as deemed appropriate by the Band Council. In reviewing the policies of the federal government around flying the Canadian flag on a pole with another flag, it is silent with respect to the status of First Nations flags, not covered. It was felt that the appropriate treatment would be to fly that flag on a separate pole rather than subordinate to the national flag of Canada on the same. So that's where it came in. Now, could we use one flagpole or yard arm with the federal and provincial and maybe town, and another flagpole for the Mi'kmaq Grand Council flag? I'm sure we could do that, but that was just a little bit more than what the scope of what we were recommending there, which was just mostly about how we'd accommodate that additional permanent flag for the Acadia Band.
Sorry, Councillor Finney.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I think it's an order of precedence issue, and I think I think it would be wise for us to ensure that, you know, if we're having the Canadian, that, you know, our national flag would obviously have to be at the top of the order of precedent. It would be, I think, more, you know, I think the whole onus on the town around the flag policy is really to try to be as inclusive as possible. So I think a second flagpole where we could fly them at the same standard height is just good form, and it's just polite.
Yeah.
I think we should probably do that versus having the First Nations or the Acadia First Nation flag below, you know, below the flag. Having two flagpoles strikes me as a wise and you know, charitable thing to do, and it's just good etiquette.
Yeah, I was much more referring to, there was a mention of 3. So for me, rather than have 3, I just have 2, the First Nations flag on its own, provincial and federal on one, so that we're not buying 3, we're not buying 2 more. That's basically where I was coming from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the guidelines around adding the provincial flag to a flagpole flying the federal flag are quite straightforward. You could just fly it below the federal flag.
Yeah.
Right.
You could do that now.
Yeah. Good.
You just have to buy a couple more flags every year.
Councillor Carver, you want to move the motion or?
Oh, well, I just want to be sure that the my suggestion about the memorial service wording be included. So I'll make that as a motion.
Because we don't have a motion on the policy at all.
Yeah.
So that's why it wasn't included. Councillor Carver, if you wanted to make the motion with respect to the policy that was recommended there, I'm sure you could work that in.
And work that wording in. Oh my, I might be all over the place again. I move the council.
Before we do that, this deputy CEO seems like she really wants to catch your attention.
I do, yes. I found these sections because I've looked that up in the federal policy. So I think what we'd be looking at is a reference to section 5 and 6. Never mind, we can fix it up. But I know I found the sections and we can fix up the wording accordingly.
Yeah, it reads, the flag is flown at half mast on all flagpoles in the town flagpole. From the time of notification of death until sunset on the day of the funeral, or if there is to be a memorial service, the half-masting should take place from the time of notification of death until sunset the following day, and from sunrise to sunset on the day of the memorial service. So that's the wording in the federal policy. So I move that council adopt the flag policy as presented, and with the inclusion of wording modeled on the federal policy, recognizing half-masting on the day of the memorial service.
You have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Finney. I have a question before I go to the CEO. So my understanding was today we're not passing the policy because we have to wait in many ways for the response. Once we approve the motions we have for the response from Acadia First Nation. Because I have some suggestions around some of the way in which we are capturing the aspect of individuals can seek council support to fly a flag. So I thought we're not supposed to discuss those today. We can't in many ways because the policy is not up for approval or reading or anything. CEO, you want to clarify on that?
Well, yeah, because I was only going to speak to the same thing as you were. So Councillor Carver, the third motion in the staff report was the one that concerned the policy. Was the council direct staff to add the draft amended flag flying policy to the council agenda when feedback has been received from the Acadia First Nation as to which flag to fly to honor the Indigenous people of McMahon. So if we amended that motion, and I know we have a motion on the floor, but let's say we had this motion on the floor, it would be the council direct staff to add the amended flag flying policy further amended to reflect, and then whatever things you guys want to see in the next draft. to the council agenda when feedback, et cetera. So by adding further amended to reflect, and then we could say to reflect the guidelines around half masting on the day of a memorial. And if Deputy Mayor, you wanted to add other stuff, then, you know, that could also be in there. If we want to direct Mo to produce a new version that is amended, but still put it on the agenda as per the recommendation in the staff report, that would have been the wording that I would recommend. But we do have a motion on the table, so I don't want to, you know, I'm stepping on a lot of toes tonight. You could friendly amend this into that, or you could start all over, or you could just take this to a vote. I guess that's up to you.
My toes are not bruised.
So you take the friendly amendment?
Another option would simply be to withdraw that motion and start fresh.
Okay.
And then by
Okay.
doing that, you give the deputy mayor an opportunity to
Yeah,
illuminate
yeah.
the other area, if Francis, you wanted to talk about.
I withdraw the motion if my seconder.
Yeah, seconder, Councillor Feeney. Okay, I wasn't prepared fully to do this, but one of the things I noticed was when we talk about individuals can, we can accept individuals to seek council's approval to have their flags flown. Some notes following thereafter continue referring just to community organizations. So for instance, I think it's item 4.1I, it says where there's no community organization's flag on the flagpole, a town flag may be flown. That doesn't indicate the idea that individuals can also suggest flags that might not be community organization flags. It sort of in many ways prejudges that. So there might be better wording to sort of ensure that whatever change we've put up there is also captured in the subsequent one. So I think there's I think a few items there that we can change. I didn't want to go into too much detail in that because we'll come and revisit the whole policy conversation when the policy comes to the table for approval, right? I think it's just changing a few things, if that makes sense, Deputy CEO. Okay. Councillor Kava, you ready to move the motion, or do you want the Deputy CEO to read it to you?
I
I've got it.
Have you got it?
Okay.
Okay. Are you going to read it?
Deputy
Yes,
CEO?
If I could, please, yes. The council directs staff to add the amended flag flying policy, further amended to reflect the federal guidelines on half masting on the day of a memorial service and wording regarding the opportunity for an individual to request a flag to be flown, to a council agenda when feedback has been received from the Acadia First Nation as to which flag is appropriate to honor the Indigenous people of Mi'kmaq. Does
So
that seem
moved.
to capture everything? Okay.
Yes.
moved.
Seconder?
And then I'll just note that, oh, did you get a seconder?
No, I haven't got a seconder. Councillor Feeney?
Thank
And I'll
you.
just note that when we do get the new version, obviously, we still haven't given it a cent or anything. So if there's further discussion on the version that Mo does, I know we didn't go over every line. There may still be some changes they can be made at that time.
Exactly. On the motion, Councillor Now?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we have 3 new flagpoles at the fire station. How does this policy reflect on that? Because we're looking at the possibility of we're looking at having a flag made up for the fire department to fly on the other flagpole. Does this policy reflect on that in any way?
This policy would indicate that you would have to fly federal, provincial, or town flags, including the flag of the Mahone Bay District Fire Department. So the only thing, you would have to fly those flags, and how you wanted to choose to do that is, I guess, would presumably be up to the department within accordance with this policy, or at least that's how I would read it.
Yes.
So we did include the flag of the department as a town flag, so that would be permitted to be used in that application.
Yeah. We're in the process now of having one designed and made up, so.
I did think that you guys were going to get to that, so I figured we'd get it in the policy now if we could. Yeah.
So just to clarify, it's only 3 flag poles there?
At the fire hall, yes.
Mhm.
Will you folks be interested in flying the Acadia First Nation flag that's proposed?
I'm not, that would have to go through a meeting, of course. I have no opposition to it. My only thing is that it's not a real prominent position where a lot of people are going to see it. So I'm thinking maybe the Acadia First Nation flag would want to be flown along by the waterfront or somewhere where people are going to see it and recognize it.
And at least the way this policy is made out, that there's an expectation that a flagpole would be used for that purpose. So as you say, Richard, it would, either be up there or on the waterfront. And I think, although there is more cost involved with getting another flagpole, the waterfront is certainly the prominent location.
Mhm. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? So moved. Motion's carried. Anybody wants to move the next motion? We had 3 motions on that report. Councillor Carver?
Well, I will move the first one, that council approve the mayor to send a letter on behalf of council to Chief Deborah Robinson of the Acadia First Nation indicating council's intent to fly a flag to honor the Indigenous people of Mi'kma'ki and requesting the advice of the Acadia First Nation Council as to the appropriate flag.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney? On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried.
And Deputy Mayor, just before I make this next motion, I assume council is aligning on 2 as the indicated number? Do I have that? Do I have that right? Just reading the tea leaves here. I'll make the motion and then we'll have a conversation. How about?
Yeah, make the motion.
Oh,
Yes.
fair enough. I'd move that that staff be directed to order 2 commercial flagpoles for installation on Edgewater Street with cost to be reflected in the 22-23 annual budget. I think that's the right number, but let's see what the opinions are.
Councillor Carver seconds on the question. CAO?
So just to add a little further nuance here, there's 2 ways that 2 flagpoles could be used on the waterfront. The report did note the condition of the existing one. So you could either have 2 flagpoles replacing the existing 1 flagpole, or you could have 2 additional flagpoles, resulting in a total with 1 being slightly different.
Well, I think
you could fly the flags on them. I would say, irrespective of the flag, you might want to
think-
replace the one that's there.
I think if we could have someone second the motion, maybe when you go to get quotes on this, maybe we'll get a 2 for we'll get a 2 buy 2 get 1 free deal, Dylan, which would change the math. I'm not sure what the sticker prices are for these polls, but if money was no object, would the idea to replace the existing pole with a new pole augmented by the other poles as previously discussed? Like, is there still a life curve in the existing pole?
I think the existing pole has certainly, been used longer than a pole would probably, be amortized for, but it is still working. And I don't think there's any immediate condition issue with it. Maureen, did you have any concern as to, other than the aesthetics, that pole was in need of replacement?
Yeah,
I hate to say that because we're pretty lucky with the age of it, but I haven't seen anything. The only thing that brought that up was really a discussion about, with one of these conversations about a flagpole, they want to get one to match the one you have. So if
Right.
council's decision is to have 2 flagpoles, one with the Canadian flag, one with the First Nations flag, then the discussion is council okay with them looking different? I have no preference myself, but that's the biggest issue
Or,
there.
and if you want to have 3 and you buy 2 new ones, you can just leave the one that's there and put 2 new ones on either side of it.
And specifically, if where this one was apparently made for us, we may end up with one pole slightly higher than the other.
Councillor Carver?
Well, apart from the aesthetics of, two at one height and a third at the other, I like the idea of having the federal flag, the provincial flag, and the First Nations flag. If there were a fourth pole, we could have the town flag too. But those three, I think, are the key ones for that location on the waterfront. So I would go for 3. So, but buy 2 new ones.
Okay.
Okay.
And any other comment, Councillor Now?
Yeah, I think the purchase of 2 new flagpoles would be appropriate, and the other one's still good. So if we put that one in the middle, it's going to be a little bit different. But 3 or 4 years down the road, we'll might need to replace that one. So then we get one to match to replace it down the road further.
Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to comment that, excuse me, if we use three flag poles, I think it's incumbent to have them all the same height, same everything. It's another $4,000 or $5,000, and in our world, that's today not very much. But that presupposes Councillor Feeney's prepared to change his motion from 2 to 3.
I am considering, when the first flagpole was in, there was a picture in the Progress Enterprise of Michael O'Connor and me and the Governor General, who is like Edward Schreier at the time. And I would have been like about 9 or 10 years old. So I think we've done pretty well with the flagpole over the last 40 years, we'll call it.
So are you willing to change your motion to 3?
I think the rationale behind, if we're going to do it, and order 3 flagpoles to get the symmetry that Councillor Carver spoke about, and obviously the economy of scale, that I'm not sure if buying 2 is if we're going to buy 3 and have 3, let's just do that. So I think we're all trying to be as frugal and as cost conscious as possible. This just strikes me, it's such a prominent location in town. It's so photographed. I mean, I think we heard last night at the HAC that the Three Churches is in the top 10 photographed images in Canada. So like, let's make sure that the flagpoles are complementary. So I think if you'd indulge me, I'd change that motion to reflect ordering 3 commercial flagpoles for installation on Edgewater.
Councillor Carver, your seconder agrees? On the motion, all in favor? I'll just make a comment. I'm the penny pincher here. I was talking about 1 and we've ended up with 3. but that's fair enough. At least we wouldn't be blamed when it's photographed that
exactly
we were penny pinching on that. Next item is 6.3, draft public participation plan for the town logo process. CAO, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'll introduce this one. So council had previously received a report from staff concerning the process to draft a logo, and with recommendation to include a sum in the budget for contracted services with respect to logo. And that motion was passed, as was this motion requesting an engagement plan. The scope of the contracted services, I think, is a large part of what's included in terms of this engagement plan. We had a lot of discussion at the staff level about the notion that a request for proposals for someone to do development of logos could also include, the goals that council has around a independent community process. And because a request for proposals process is requesting proposals outlining what we're trying to achieve, and allowing would-be contracted parties to specify a process that would be independent, as long as it did reflect the intention to have broad community participation and eventually arrive at a single logo, which would be provided to council by recommendation. So, so that process isn't really prescribed in the engagement plan. And I think that's probably the key comment with respect to this engagement plan. We did talk about how prescriptive should we be about the process. You know, we could say that the consultant will support the work of a community committee. We can say they'll carry out surveys. We can say they'll hold focus group conversations. But what we did was essentially just left that the proposing of what would be the appropriate process to achieve council's objectives in the hands of a contracted submission. So that's how this plan is advanced. Presumably council would then have a lot of an interest in the way that the scope of work was described. So pursuant to the approval of this item in the budget, could certainly see council reviewing the scope of the request for proposals before that was issued to make sure that we're handing off the correct expectations to a contractor. But that, you know, obviously that's one way to approach this. I think we wanted to maintain the most independence for the process, even if it might be a little bit more costly. We're just talking about paying for flagpoles. Now we're talking about paying for logos. So that's the recommended engagement plan and sort of the philosophy behind it. But happy to take questions, or council may have suggestions to amend that document in accordance with our community engagement policy. These documents are presented to give council a place to start, but obviously can be amended at council's direction.
Thank you. But I'll jump into it if you don't mind, just a few comments in thinking about about this, and I'll ask for forgiveness from staff because I think I should have, in my mind, should have caught this when we had the initial conversation to ask staff to bring back a community engagement plan. And as I was reading through this, what it occurred to me is that we might get into a process whereby we've in some way prescribed how things will go, and the community ends up in the same place where they were last time, that they were not involved from the get-go. And my suggestion to council is probably slightly different. Just hear me out, and then we'll have a conversation about how it goes. My thoughts were, if we can think about, we want this process to end at a particular time, and give ourselves a timeline to say, well, we would like for us, we know we have a limited term as council by, I think, 2024, if I'm not mistaken, at some point. We want this process to culminate before a term elapses. So what are the decision-making points that need to happen so that we're able to deliver on this? So that's one thing. But also, in our initial conversations, we talked about empowering the community to come up with a recommendation for council that council can actually approve going forward. And for me, empowering the community would entail empowering community from the get-go. And so my suggestion would be to strike up a limited term committee for the next, from now, with a term till February or March, when we will have the next budget conversation, that will have one council representation, one staff representation, and at least 3 members of the public. And they will be given that time limited period to come up with a process that will engage the community and deliver at least a recommendation to council on a logo that the community has approved in some way, shape, or form. And that through that process, that committee will come up with a well-documented and well-articulated community engagement process that council can approve for how this thing will be achieved going forward. So that in that way, it is the communities that's determining what kind of community engagement will suit the community, rather than council or a contractor who we've identified doing that piece. If that committee decides that they want to seek a contractor to do that, it's the community committee that has done that, as opposed to council sort of, or somebody who's being paid by council. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way I would envision it. CAO, you have a comment?
Oh, I guess it's a comment, it's a question. in this scenario, I guess the concern that I would have is who is actually going to do anything. So the committee could be established and they could talk about what would be ideal, but if they weren't resourced, then presumably staff would be expected to execute things, and that therefore would put the committee in a position of only acting through recommendation to council, with council providing direction to staff. That sounds far more like what we've done in the past, and far less like putting the community in the driver's seat. So, you know, I would suggest maybe as a bit of an amendment to your proposal is that a committee be struck with the purpose of developing and issuing a request for proposals from consultants that would then work to support the committee and report to the committee and be charged with producing an end result. So could be a committee, but the committee would be paired with a consultant and put in the driver's seat in terms of, you know, what would be the criteria to select that consultant. I think we got to make sure the resources are there. So question, comment, but I just was concerned about the role of staff in the process and how that would then tie it back to council on a continuing basis.
No, I agree. I think what I did not mention is that the parameters that we'll be providing will include the resources. So in the numbers that have been put there, I think council is ready to support that number of, is it 25,000? If council is ready to support that, then that will be the resource that committee is assigned, or a finite resource that we might agree upon. And we know in many ways, for me, it'd be a case of we have to make sure that the parameters we're providing, the committee doesn't come back and say, well, oh, you thought you wanted to spend X, but we want to spend 3 times X. That's not what I would hope that we'd envision. For me, if you can give those parameters and the resources that you're talking about, I'd be perfectly fine with it, as long as they're involved from the get-go rather than, I guess, a consultant-led process. So your amendment makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Penny, you can.
Sorry, Councillor Kava and then Councillor Feeney. I keep muting myself. You're muted. You're on mute, Councillor Kava.
I clicked twice. I can certainly support that idea with the CAO's variation on the theme, but would, I think, be happier to see a committee with 2 members of council and 5 community members. Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Fair enough. Any other, Councillor Feeney?
So the committee would be struck to develop an RFP that would engage consulting and graphic design expertise and so on and so forth. Okay. I think the important thing is that even though the issue is evolving into kind of a community logo, versus the kind of the constraints of a corporate logo, it still has to have a production quality that can allow it to be used for corporate purposes. And has, you know, so that's going to require kind of the graphic design expertise that the committee, that we won't be able to take the winning submission from Bayview's grade 9 art class, for example, as many good ideas will come from that. It just that it probably wouldn't translate necessarily into kind of a logo that we could truly use. So I think this is a fine way forward. And again, I think the deputy mayor hits the nail on the head. I mean, let's if we end up with the right consultant and we end up with the right process and we have 5 or 6 community members participate heavily in the process, I think we will end up in a better place. So I think with Councillor Carver's amendment to the size of the committee, that still strikes me as 7 people does still strike me as a small enough group that they can truly be productive.
Yeah. In my eyes, it will be 8 because there'll be a staff resource to that. CAO, you have a comment?
Yeah, just we've got some good suggestions. Deputy Mayor had a suggestion. I had added something to it. Councillor Carver has. So we've kind of got a concept for revision of the engagement plan. And I just wanted to suggest that when council has kind of finalized the concept, that the motion tonight might just be to direct staff to amend the engagement plan accordingly and then bring it back on your next agenda with these changes. And then, then we can actually consider and make sure that that is reflective of what council is looking for.
Great. Thank you. Council, what's your wish? Somebody ready to move a motion? Councillor Now?
Yeah, I would move that we refer this to staff to amend the proposed policy to reflect what we had discussed tonight.
Councillor Now moves the motion. I'm sure the deputy CEO will help us clarify. Seconded by Councillor Carver. Can you help us out, Deputy CEO?
I think, are we still talking about having this amended and then coming back for the July 14th meeting?
That's council's wish, I believe.
Okay.
July 12th or 14th, Mo? I thought it was the 12th.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Okay. Okay, yeah. So direct staff to revise the draft public participation plan to reflect discussion and to be added to the agenda for the July 12th meeting of council.
And in terms of like discussion, like we can include council's, say, to be reflective of council's discussion concerning the incorporation of a steering committee, maybe just like that much additional detail so that anyone who didn't also watch the recording would have some sense where we were going.
Yeah.
Sounds
Great.
good.
Sounds good to you, Councillor Now? And the seconder, Councillor Carver, you agree? On the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, folks. That was less painful than I thought it would be. we have 3 other agenda items, 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6, and I'm mentioning them as a group because I have a question for council before we go into 6.4. In knowing that we have some of these items, in my mind, have implications for the budget, and they have. For me, there's some detail in it, but there's a lot of budget conversation there, and I was wondering if council would be okay with us deferring them to a fast budget meeting so that we can discuss them. And the reason I say that is particularly for the facility improvements one. I know we tasked staff to bring something to us. I can't remember exactly how we defined it, about how the old fire station can be, or what potential benefits there can be to explore other things. We haven't seen that yet, and if we go into this conversation without that, I feel that we might just have an impasse around where we go with that. So that's just something I wanted to float to council to sort of think about, and maybe staff can also chime in as to whether there's something in here that if we do that, it might affect things or might delay things unnecessarily. CEO? Yeah,
I think deferring the reports themselves to the second budget meeting, I guess, because that's where council gets into discussion, is certainly reasonable. I thought that might be council's preference. Most of this is just like information that couldn't really be included in the budget without more direction. So if we refer the reports to what I'd probably do in terms of the budget, we wouldn't include these items except where it specifies in the report that they have previously been included in a budget, like we're just carrying them over. We wouldn't include them. But in that discussion meeting, which is intended to result in amendment of the draft budget, council could by motion direct staff to include any of the above or any other, anything else, of course, that's the point of that meeting. So that's probably how we would, we wouldn't include an amount of money either with respect to a new public works building or with respect to a renovation of an existing, because council has yet to really have the opportunity to contemplate in the context of the budget whether we could afford to build a new public works building. And I think, you'll want to have the rest of the budget to consider that. I did want to address though your example because it was an unfortunate one in the sense that the budget will not answer your questions around the disposal of the property. I don't expect that those will be answered by next week. I can put a push on or maybe they will be answered by that. I think the 14th that Mo noted earlier, that's the meeting we'd be deferring these to. So that's 2 weeks out. So I can make an effort to get those questions answered by that meeting. That's probably the best case scenario. We noted that there were a couple of things that potentially obstructing the notion of subdivision of the property and title and being able to put it up for sale. So if those are things that would be impactful in terms of council's consideration of this item in the budget, then I'll see what we can do to make sure that you have that information in time.
I would certainly appreciate that, having that before looking at the other upgrades possibility.
Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Finney.
Thank you. As I said before we started the meeting, I have about a 20-minute treatise on this whole situation that goes back to 2019 and the $100,000 budget to renovate Town Hall. Given the comments that I've just heard, which I don't particularly agree with, I guess what I will do is I will summarize what I was going to do verbally in a memo to council, because I am frankly deeply concerned. In 2019 we started with a $100,000 line item for a budget to renovate Town Hall, which turned into, as we speak today, somewhere around $450,000. More than that if you count the 2009 work, and we're looking at another $400,000 when you add contingencies in, which will get us close to $1 million project. I think we're on the cusp of a similar fiscal disaster, may not be too strong a word, if we don't reconsider the whole thing as a package. I think there are really several alternatives that we should be looking at. And I would note that we had 3 things in the motion of April the 4th, 3 motions. One was for pre-design and cost of a new public works garage. We got a cost, but we didn't get pre-design and we didn't get any sort of scope of work. We haven't got the potential for subdividing, and I gather from what Dylan just said that that's because there are some issues with that. And we were asked to have a comparative review and valuation of the building, which we also don't have. So we are in a position where we're unable to make any decisions because we don't have any information. And in fact, I'm not even sure we're asking ourselves the right questions. So having said that, I will sit down on Canada Day, which is a holiday, so I'll be getting triple time. And I will try to put what I've got jotted down as speaking notes into a reasonably coherent memo, and hopefully you will all read it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Finney?
No, I guess I won't repeat what Councillor Wilson said, but I think that the only other thing I'd say about the line extension memo was that I think that's very helpful in illuminating. I think that the information specifically around the Cleveland property and that request to council helps really crystallize in my mind. That there is probably a business case to support that request. just based on the capital costs, which are coming in a lot lighter than they were expected to, say, a year ago. I think we were talking about a much higher number. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that number. But I think I think as we discuss those types of opportunities within the budget context, I guess what I'm hearing, that right now, none of those investments would be included in the baseline budget as initially tabled by Dylan and Ashley next month, early next month, but that we would still have an opportunity to evaluate them and potentially include them. No, but through notionally like a change request into the budget process. It's just that right now, without direction from council tonight, which I don't think is forthcoming, they just won't be woven into the planning document for early July, which is, I mean, I think that's a fair approach, Dylan. That makes good sense to me.
Yeah, that's really it. And I mean, certainly sympathetic to Councillor Wilson's point. I mean, we pick an arbitrary day and we say we're going to have all the information at this time, and these things are a larger process, and certainly they also require dialogue. So the council does have to have discussions. So we'll have what information we can have available. Ultimately, council could take further into this fiscal year to reach certain decisions, and the budget provides great context, but it doesn't mean that you're unable to make decisions after that point either. So, we may not add any of these even in the course of the budget process. And that's not to say that the situation doesn't develop and result in something being added later, and that's certainly appropriate. The only one I wanted to note in terms of the service extensions was, as noted in the report, the service extension on Main Street on East Main, that is included in the budget already because it's included in a larger project, which will be included in the budget. But if we were to be panned for funding again, then that smaller project, speaking just to the service extension, is something that council could consider on its own merits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other comments from council? Are we ready to move a motion, Councillor Finney?
So I'd move that the three planning documents be received and be forwarded to the budget process starting early next month.
We have a seconder. Councillor Now. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. I guess we don't have any council items or any committee reports on here, or any new business. We're close to. Do we have any viewers watching us online?
We do. We have 5 people watching right now, but we do not have any questions from the gallery.
Yeah, folks watching us from home, if you have a question, this is the time to post it. We'll give you a few minutes to do that before we go into closed session. So we can just take 2 minutes to just give somebody time to post something, and then we'll move on.
And just to look out the window and be shocked at the fact that there's still light out there. I could go out and cut grass even after a council back.
I want to know what the deputy mayor has got from my plans for the rest of the evening, because I'm totally at loose ends.
Well, I'm thinking about your overtime tomorrow, so we're just giving you some time now. You can start
typing now. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So at 8:22, I'll be looking for a motion to go into closed session. At 8:22, let's give folks who might be trying to type now and that time lag in cyberspace to get through.
My clock is wrong.
So, sorry about that.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I missed.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, you said at 8:32 you'll be looking for, I missed what happened there.
8:22. So it was two minutes from
Okay.
when I said that, basically.
Thank you.
Just to give somebody time to type. And I know sometimes there's a lag, as you mentioned, and in the past we've been told we're too swift to move into closed session. miss questions. So no questions? Well, thank you, folks who've been watching from home. Wish you a happy Canada Day tomorrow and a long weekend. Looking for a motion to move into closed session. So moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor?